Well, I was busy.
North Texas and Indiana announced the big new kickoff game. Big one.
Seriously? Certain things I saw coming today, I did not see that one coming. What do we have on that day at noon? Do we know yet?
You got some better ones.
Oh, okay. This is the day where we have everybody together. So, first day for our presidents and chancellors to begin meeting, and coaches wrapped up their meetings. We had Brian Seeley from the College Sports Commission, John Bramlett, member of the staff there, visited in kind of our all comers group. So that's our not our coaches, but athletics directors, senior women administrators, faculty representatives, but also with our presidents and chancellors, our athletics directors and football coaches. Heard from Dr. Alan Sills, the NCAA's chief medical officer, and our chief medical advisor, Dr. Katie O'Neill. We also had, at least others did, interaction with ESPN. Really good news for us there. Most watched conference in college football, 36% share of the viewership, 68 billion minutes of TV consumed. We averaged on the SEC on ABC 7.3 million viewers across 37 games. I shared with our presidents and chancellors, if you go back to when we pivoted from CBS to ABC, we projected maybe 2 or 3 Saturdays we'd have that noon, midday, and prime time continuity, and we've had that 8 and 9 times the last couple of seasons, and our viewers have responded well across the country. It was our most watched college football season on record across Nielsen rated networks last year, so really good news. And our network is on pace to have to be the most watched college network for a 6th straight year. We saw some of the data there. Men's basketball, the SEC controlled games drew their largest audience in 15 years on ESPN networks. We set a really high bar with 14 teams the year prior selected to the NCAA tournament. That clearly built interest that's continued. We didn't hit that 14 number, but had a highly competitive season and were the most watched conference in women's basketball. We also today announced a new gambling and integrity initiative, which is really connected to things we've been doing over the last few years as activity has ramped up. So there'll be a video featuring me, but also educational opportunities for all of our student athletes and even our staff members. And one of the things through our integrity monitoring relationship, we've just seen this huge uptick in activity around prediction markets. There's so many states where sports gambling through the phone doesn't exist, but I think I said this earlier, something that kind of looks like sports gambling and feels like sports gambling and call it something different, and the impacts are the same. And we think it's important to try to provide some education on what's happening and how to deal with the pressures that come from that. Some of the mental health pressures are real. Just posted a statement on the bill that was introduced today by Senators Cruz and Cantwell. I've not had the opportunity to read a 111-page bill. It wasn't that long ago I was being asked about my feelings on a skinny bill out of the Senate. I don't think 111 pages is skinny bill, so there's a lot in there. So I'm not an expert on all of its contents. I've read bits and pieces, and others have sent me bits and pieces. You can find that statement on our Twitter feed, and I'll stop and see what questions you may have. Heather.
Yeah, Dr. Keenum said on Feinbaum today that the SEC's position is still 16. So I wanted to ask you, even though you said on Monday that you've not ruled out 24 or 28, and there seems to be a lot of information gathering, is it fair to report as of now that the SEC's position is still 16 as a preferred format?
Yes.
Okay.
I said that in April.
Yeah.
And in April when we were in Las Colinas, I said you can go back and look at my no, that was Fiesta Bowl where I said look at my prior statements. We've not taken votes or positions. I said no decisions will be made, so we default to where we've been, which is 16.
Okay.
Ross.
Someone here said that
Someone here.
Someone
The
here.
old someone here.
Someone
People
here.
say, they've said,
A person, a human
that
said,
group.
a human said that the bill, the Senate bill, targets the SEC and Big Ten, described it as targeting the SEC and Big Ten. Curious of how you view what you know about the bill when it comes to your conference in the Big Ten.
I think there was a reference to conferences that had, in the current fiscal year, revenue over $1 billion have certain limitations. To my knowledge, there's only 2 of those, or 1. But I've not read the bill, so I can't go very deep. That'll be a conversation for another day. I'll let the person who commented stand by their statement. I'm sure it was a wise person if they were here. Assuming it wasn't somebody walking the hallway that we don't know. Go back to you, Ralph.
Considering just all the efforts you put in Washington and your colleagues, is any movement from the Senate on a bill for college sports, could that still be, would you still construe that as positive? The simple fact that they are working towards something, could that be spun as positive?
I appreciate the work. I think the fact that people are engaged shows what I said. I think it was Monday, that we've been effective at raising awareness and educating. That doesn't mean that everything in a particular bill merits support nor opposition. You have to read that, and so I'm still in that reality, but appreciate the efforts. Go to the right here.
Greg, there's a part of that bill introduced today that walks through the opportunity for conferences to come together and pool media rights. And there's a 75% threshold where if 75% of all FBS schools signed off on it, then it could happen. The math plays out where if the SEC and Big Ten don't want to do that and everybody else in FBS, including Notre Dame, does, they would win out. Do you have any immediate reactions to that? I assume that.
I need to read the language.
Okay.
I've had the.
I'm sure people have texted it to you.
No, I've got the whole bill. I have 111 pages, so nobody's excerpted things. So I've heard, but I need to read
Okay.
rather than speculate. I've made my position on the notion that we need the SBA clear, which is I don't think we do. But we'll have more to say after we have a chance to read. Brandon?
I'm just curious, after you read it yourself, who else do you turn to, to get their input on the bill?
We have government relations ties, folks that have worked with us for years. We have outside counsel we've asked to review. We have staff who will review. We have effective relationships with government relations leaders on each of our campuses, so we have a lot of input opportunities.
Have you guys talked this week about a timeline for when you want to decide kind of an official position for the SEC on the playoff side?
We have not talked about like our decision point. I talked with our coaches like through the summer, and this is likely a fall decision. I would not think, at least from my perspective, and I'm not the only point of influence, that we'd be bumping up against the deadline, but as we work to gather information, see if there's interest in an expanded playoff from the media marketplace, think through scheduling issues, try to plot out the calendar depending on what format is in place. All of those need some time for research and communication and scenario planning. So there's no need to just rush like we have to by, pick a random date, media days. So in media days, if I'm asked, I'm going to hope somebody's recording this, will send it to me. I will replay most likely during media days that I think we're looking for a fall decision.
And Hunter Yurchek today said he was not pleased with the kickoff times and wanted that to be changed. Is that something that could be revisited, and what's your reaction to his displeasure?
We've communicated the displeasure in advance. It hasn't changed. That's one of those points of authority that's given to our broadcast partner. And the squeeze on the West Coast game, we don't have to do what other colleague conferences do by comparison. And then the squeeze with an early kickoff is not something that I'm thrilled about either, but we do delegate that authority as part of our TP contracts. Yep.
So the bill introduced today has a very short one-sentence provision saying it is not going to take a position on athlete-employee status. And I'm just curious, I know that that's very important. It's in the SCORE Act that athletes are not employees. That was a really important tenet for you guys, or our conferences in the NCAA. Is that a deal breaker for you, given that it's just sort of a neutrality thing?
As we walked through the potential for a more narrow bill back in March, February, March, that was one of the issues we've considered. And that's not a stopping point for us, that pivot. I think the NCAA's position may be different. I shouldn't be speaking for them, but as I was asked about our position, I said, you know what? There are smaller conferences. There's Division II and Division III. Their ability to conduct athletic programs, that's the primary issue. And I was on a Division III campus 2 weeks ago. I have friends who are athletics directors at some Division III campuses, and I've asked them about the realities around that employment definition being applied to student athletes broadly. Or if you look at the HBCUs, which wrote a letter, or 10 conferences that withheld their support for the SCORE Act last fall, now have written to talk about, as I recall the letter just a few weeks ago, how important the employment protection is for them. And that's my view. I think it's not a stopping point for us. I think others ought rightly to be attentive and concerned.
Greg Seeley talked to you guys today. What did you and your membership learn about the current state of the College Sports Commission, especially with related to the deals that are under review from your league and others?
I was not in the large session with athletics directors. He started to take a question, and my phone rang about the schedule for legislation. So I can't speak to what was shared there. In the presidents and chancellors meeting, Brian had a presentation. We had the kind of interactive Q&A you would expect. Deal clearance. What does the arbitration outcome mean? There's a court matter upcoming. What can we do to help the CSC be more effective? We had the kind of conversation as well that I had in here, which is, thing didn't exist a year ago. We did not have a settlement a year ago at this time. And so it's gone from startup to a much different enterprise than it was. It has had outcomes. It is providing oversight for the first time around NIL activity, but there's opportunities for improvement, and we wanted to learn how we might be able to contribute to areas of improvement.
What are those areas of reform? He mentioned reform today of policies that you guys are.
We'll see. However we can be helpful, Ross. We're going to replace. It just means more with however we can be helpful is our tagline.
It's a great.
Indeed. Yep.
Greg, you pointed to a number of those stats, and obviously it was a great year for television viewership for the SEC. I'm curious, do you feel like at this point, and a couple of years into this ESPN deal, do you feel like this deal might be undervalued relative to what you guys are delivering?
Yes.
Does the ESPN feel the same way?
They probably have great value. I mean, keep in mind, we were really undervalued before.
Yeah.
Like really undervalued.
Yeah.
The move to ESPN was based on modern metrics for 15 games. I think that's held up well so far. We've had increases. We had the ability to expand and add to that. We've had a 9th game that's built. So, to be big picture, everybody would say they're undervalued. I think ESPN has continued to work with us and Disney and Jimmy and his team in a healthy kind of way. You know, kickoff times aside, relationally, we've continued to make progress. So, yeah, would you like more in this environment? Do I think we're over delivering? Sure, but I'd much rather be over delivering than under delivering. And that's part of the message with our football coaches today, with our athletics directors yesterday, and even with our presidents and chancellors, is the importance of us continuing to perform at a high level.
Is that a conversation that could be had with ESPN about perhaps?
No, I don't.
renegotiating?
People ask me this, so I gave a flippant answer. But I don't talk about my negotiations with media or anyone.
Back to Hunter's comments. Does the league have any say to ESPN if an AD comes to you and says we would like to reconsider the times, or does ESPN have full autonomy there?
They have autonomy. We provide input, and that happens throughout the season. And it's happened in our old 6-day, 12-day notice. We would have that play out week to week. So understanding there's frustration, we haven't withheld the ability for the broadcast entity to make kickoff decisions. That's theirs. We do provide input.
Greg, with the bill, the last three,
I'll come back, Pete. Get your camera ready.
In the last few years, does the photographer show up? Last few years, the Big Ten has moved past the SEC in football performance, at least in the college football playoff. Why or how do you think that has happened, and to what extent, as commissioner, if at all, do you have?
What metrics are you using to form the question?
Big Ten's won 3 straight national championships.
Okay.
The SEC is 0-4 last 3 years in the head-to-head playoff matchups against the Big Ten. So that would be the metrics.
Yeah, so that's a pretty narrow band, which is why I ask. And let's go back to the Peach Bowl. Was it January 1st, 2022? Field goal sales left. Georgia wins. We're great. The margins are so thin. So Michigan beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl in overtime. Last year, you look at the Texas-Ohio State game. Texas scores. There's a screenplay, breaks the game open. You go to possessions in the red zone, really close, and there's a turnover. And I use those. And this year, the ball's in the air. Ole Miss, Miami. I'm standing in the end zone. Pretty good grab. That wasn't a Hail Mary. That was an attempt to score a touchdown on the last play. I mean, those are small margins between winning and losing. We prevailed on those small margins a number of times. You think about the onside kick in Phoenix in 2016 against Clemson. You kind of go down the line. We had some blowouts. If you look at the entirety of our league, we are by far the most competitive, the strongest football league, by far. But you're going to lose games when it's close and competitive like that. So why have they surpassed us? It's an oddball. It's bounced a couple times the wrong way. Indiana was pretty dominant in the Rose Bowl last year. A lot of other games you look pretty close margin, and we've been the beneficiary on those. And I don't think that, hey, if we win, you don't ask me the question. It's like when Florida was down 14 to Houston in the second half in the national championship game in San Antonio. If you look at me, I've got my head in my hands because I know the first question is going to be, you had this like great basketball season, and is it really now a disappointment because you didn't win the national championship? Like I'm sure that's the first question. You know, the first question I got after that game, hey, when Florida was down, if they hadn't won, would the season have been a disappointment? But those are about the margins. And you know what I said? I said, the beauty is I don't have to answer that question because they won. But in a competitive environment, the margins are going to be thin, and we've come up on the short end. And I can assure you that everyone in this league is trying to figure out how to come up on the top end of that in the future. But I think from a big picture, the breadth, the depth of this league stands alone. In fact, we saw metrics out of the college football playoff presentation where there's no doubt we're the strongest league. Now there's some segments of other leagues that are towards where we are, but not nearly the entirety of a conference like the Southeastern Conference. It's a pretty special place. Pete.
So you obviously spent a lot of time in Washington, working
this particular bill that's coming forward here, how much exposure would you say? I don't know if it's say in it necessarily, but how much did you know beforehand what was in it, and would you say you had a voice or the SEC had a voice as it was being formed along?
We certainly communicated. I have to read the bill to see whether it's evaluated. It's interesting in Washington to think about where the voices of influence come from. And I think that bill speaks to some of the voices of influence other than ours. We'll see where it goes. We have to dig into it to understand. But we've been at this a long time. And as I indicated yesterday, I think there's a lot more attention because of the work we've done. Whether we agree or disagree, we'll have to dig into to figure out.
What are those voices of influence? Who are those?
You guys can write about those. You guys can figure that out.
Greg, Josh Brooks spoke today about the need to at least be prepared in the future to even potentially provide some help to the CSC, whatever you want to term it or whatever, to do so before the next transfer portal in January. And that falls in line with some of the discussions and talk we've heard about self-governance. How is the work, I guess, behind the scenes, the thoughts, the ideas that have been presented, how have you received those? And not to say how confident are you, but I guess take me through the progress being made along those lines and where you might want to be and hear something from your leaders on that later this fall.
I'm not sure I understand what Josh said. So I don't know what, like that part of the set, I don't know what he said in relation to the CSC. How do I receive it? Generally in conversation, people will share their ideas. What I shared earlier is our interaction with Brian included a conversation about how can we be helpful in supporting you and meeting the expectations that exist for the College Sports Commission. And so that's the chain of what it is. And as I said earlier, I'm not going to just walk through a list here. That's for further conversation.
He also spoke about, with the concerns around the revenue share cap and his idea of.
This is Josh.
Yes, Josh, about the idea of a luxury tax. How much discussion has there been about that this week?
Well, we're having the discussion now. I'm assuming some other people talked about it, and I would define it as that.
Greg, do you think, how do you think the A4 conferences have done in supporting the College Sports Commission?
We've spent a lot of time. So I don't know if you're talking at the conference level. There's.
You guys created this, and it feels. I think there's a sense that you're not fully. You guys created this thing, and now I get a sense that sometimes Brian kind of feels like he's out on his own.
Speaking from the Southeastern Conference perspective, when we were here, we had drafted and introduced, and I think maybe a week after we left, had 16 universities sign a participant agreement. That was preceded by a meeting of all four conferences where everybody was focused on doing so, and it didn't happen for months and months and months. And then in November, something new was introduced, AGs became involved. I don't look at us as we weren't not being supportive. We were fully supportive. That was the message at the president's and chancellor's level. But then when things languish, you get into choppier seas and different decisions are made. There's reports of the amount of third-party NIL submitted for review, and we're at the high end. I think that's an indication that we're trying to make a system work. There are some other numbers that raise question marks in our room, like are people submitting at that level given what's happening in recruiting and the stories that go on. And so I can't speak for the other three about supportive. I can speak to the extent that we spent a great deal of time on it. We talk about the elements of the settlement, how to make sure it's operationalized properly. Are there policy adjustments? We've expanded the board, and I think those are indications of support. I will go back, though, to we've created something that's never existed before. And it's fair to always expect turbulence. What we have to do, whether it's what Brandon asked me in Josh's remarks or some of the other questions, we have to figure out what have we learned over the last year or so, and how does that inform the kind of support, to use the word you've asked, that's needed to make the College Sports Commission function effectively. And I think that's an indication of support, but I can't speak for others. I can speak for my rooms.
Will that participant agreement be signed anytime soon?
I don't know. It was a topic of conversation again here. And, you know, a commitment to make, fundamentally, it's about a commitment to make a system work. And, you know, the issue is, do people really want to be governed? And, okay, there's antitrust laws, but there's decisions that can be made that aren't going to be in conflict. Some of the decisions within the settlement were intentional to allow that type of outcome to provide some level of protection, but people have to commit to a system. It doesn't matter what system you pick, and there are a lot of opinions about what the system should be. But fundamentally, are a large group of institutions going to commit to make a system work?
Greg,
Nicole.
should the federal government have a say in when places can fire and hire and interview football coaches?
That's been asked of me, and I've just kind of stood on the sidelines on that one. We obviously had a lot of turnover in football, and in our presidents and chancellors room in the aftermath, it was we have to have a more systematic way for transition of coaching roles, and it was particularly focused on football, which I understand is in this new legislation. I'm federal government is less type of person philosophically, but if that's something that helps from an orderliness standpoint, that could be, it seems healthy.
When you ask the federal government for help, though,
You never know where it goes. Finish your thought.
took the words right out
There's
of my mouth.
President Reagan, we're here, right?
9 words. Greg,
Yeah.
what is your advice to member schools if they talk to you about deals that get hung up by the CSC? And what is your level of concern of athletes sitting out if what's promised in recruiting isn't approved by the CSC?
The first part of your question, the answer is be responsive and be engaged. And as we've talked, we've got deals that have been hung up. Sometimes you ask Brian or his staff, or my staff asks the why, and you'll get an answer, well, we asked this question and we haven't received a response. It's not maybe from the school, it may be from the young person involved or somebody involved in the deal. And it's not simply like CSC mechanics that hold things up. I think that has to be understood. You've seen a process that did not approve a set of deals that went to arbitration and had an outcome. We've identified that reality, which could mean you don't have deals that apply, or going back to reconfigure deals to make sure they're within the boundaries of the settlement or of the rules that have been developed since the settlement. So the message is, you know, the expectation of conforming within the decisions that are made within CSC. Now, the feedback is, you know, you want things to move along. I don't know what was the second part of the question.
Just what's your level of concern of players deciding not to play if, hey, I was promised this in recruiting, I'm not getting it, but it's because...
Yeah, that could be there. I don't rate my levels, but there's certainly aware of that possibility. And, you know, the system, again, third-party name, image, and likeness was created through state laws. It was not overseen. What happened as an outcome of the House case was there's revenue share included from an institutional standpoint. That seems to work. And then oversight of name, image, and likeness. And there will be stress anytime there's oversight. But to the earlier question, or the earlier part of your question, we need a commitment to make a system work. And here's a system that can work, but we need the commitment to make it work.
Last question.
Greg, we heard from
He didn't get one.
Yeah, I appreciate it. When you look at you launched the gambling initiative today, and the unregulated apps that are out there right now that are either hard to watch by betting integrity companies. Just for instance, I'm not going to name the state, but I was in my home state recently. I did not know that you could get doing half, and there would be a prediction market type of betting that I could do in that state. Is that something that seriously concerns the conference in trying to make sure that the players are abiding by the rules?
Yeah. So I want to be clear. Today we added a component to what we've done around gambling integrity. We've been in the monitoring activity. We've done posters and other points of communication. We've done educational pieces. We do background checks on officials. I'm probably leaving something out. Oh, the availability reporting. I mean, so that's all connected. None of that's isolated, and we added a component. To your specific question, what you described, the answer is yes. Is that a concern? But as I learn more about, like, what are they called, VPNs, right? So you get a VPN and you're in Vegas all of a sudden, or you're in some place where gambling's legal. There are workarounds. There's offshore stuff. You kind of draw a line between that and recall pre-PASPA decision. There was offshore. There were bookies. There were local runners. I mean, there was gambling. What's happening now is it's becoming enculturated. And that makes it more, like, if you had asked me that question like in 2015, it would have been the only time I'd be asked that question probably that year. Now it's a continuing theme. And so on a college campus, unlike a professional player, the points of exposure for a college athlete are enormous. Sitting in class, walking to class, being in practice, student assistance, volunteer this. If you're a professional athlete, you go from your home to the gated practice facility where there's a security guard. You go in, you spend your day there. Now it's up to you. You go back home. You don't have nearly the points of contact. I don't know that reality is on the minds of people making policy and laws. Because that means, wow, if I see that individual with a boot on and I'm involved in gambling, that's really valuable information. That's why we went to availability reporting, to take that pressure off. Or how we monitor students that come into our athletic programs for support purposes. The information they have is really important. So that's part of the educational effort. That's just stuff that's really unique to college sports. And it probably is not very interesting to write in an article, right? But that's the reality we deal with that's totally different from gambling around professional athletes who have that much more isolated reality. And by the way, have a level generally of maturity that's beyond where maybe an 18 or 19-year-old at. That's why I think the concerns in college sports around sports gambling, prediction markets, offshore stuff, I think there's still probably local bookies out there running numbers somehow. All of that stuff has to be on our mind. And we've seen some of the impacts directly in this league. Coach lost an opportunity for a career. Some former student athletes have been swept up in things where they've lost careers. And we've had games in the indictments in the fall, not involving any of our teams, but the opponents, who instead of losing by 30 decided to lose by 40 because somebody approached them. I mean, those things are real, even in a name, image, and likeness world.
Thank you.
Yep. See you tomorrow. Maybe. Yeah, coaches leave, and I learned how low my popularity is.